Yes, it's the Holy Grail, the game's ultimate prize. Legends will be made on Saturday night over in the West. An historic grand final in Perth awaits us all. The two best teams of the season, and tonight we'll try and tell you who wins and why. Hello and welcome along to On the Couch. Nathan Jones, our special guest. It's the Demons and the Dogs, and they've come from a fair way back, gentlemen, as I welcome you, particularly the Demons. In 2020, they finished 9th and the Dogs finished 7th. They've been outperformers all year, and I can't wait for what's going to be a cracking match.
Yeah, great to be finally here. So looking forward to the two best teams most of the year. So pretty quiet weekend, Rooster. It was a bit of click and collect at Bunnings and a little bit of babysitting. My own babies.
Thank God it's over. And they've tested the AFL. They've proofed it out. It doesn't work. That was the most boring weekend, I think, of all time. Spent the two of us nursing sore hamstrings after we tried to kick torps at Marvel Stadium for the longest kick.
Yeah, there's been a lot of focus on your toe, Brown. You've had the ice pack on it for a week, but I'm not going to give anything away.
No, that might be giving a little lead in, Jared. You'll have to watch it. Fair to say, I reckon tune in early to longest kick.
Well, a bloke who's been doing a lot of work in preparation, because he may have the biggest job of them all in lifting the cup. He's been in the gym preparing, is Gary Lyon, and once again he joins us from Crown Towers. Welcome, G.
Hey, g'day, boys. I wouldn't be lifting, handing over if, in fact, it goes Melbourne's way, Jared, as Chris Grant would be. Great thrill, great honour. Couldn't believe it when I was asked, and it's made sitting in that hotel room or that apartment room for 14 days all worthwhile. So it is exciting. Starting to build up. The Brownlow here last night was fantastic. The people of Perth have embraced this massively. So it's going to be a build, and by the time Saturday comes around, they'll be at fever pitch. It's going to be spectacular.
Gary, based on what we've experienced in Melbourne, if Gill suggests that there should be a bye before the grand final again next year, I think there'll be a civil war. But you're over there, and I spoke to Glenn Jakovich tonight on radio, and he says it's been unbelievable for the game. They had the amateur games all played their grand finals on the weekend. It's been 2 weeks celebration of footy. Would you like to see the bye instituted full-time?
No, I wouldn't, but I'm not immersed in the footy culture here at Perth. I mean,
it's a good sell, Jerry.
I watched 2 waffle games.
Yeah.
I watched 2 waffle games on the weekend. I didn't get to the amateurs, but look, you could certainly mount fixtures all around the country to fill in the weekend, but we understand why it is here. We understand the situation. We hope that next year we're not having to deal with COVID, Jared, and that we could roll straight into it, because that would have been the preference, I think, coming in. But it is what it is. We're doing what we have to do, and it's not going to detract from what's going to take place this Saturday. I'll give you the tip right now.
This view that it's destiny for Melbourne to win this flag, Gary. They're short price favourites. There's this view around town that the Dogs are only turning up, and yet, as we know, you could have said the same thing about Adelaide in 2017.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that view's coming from. That might be some wishful Melbourne supporters. It might be someone or a group or a large vocal group who are hoping for the fairy tale and the dream. We know it's much tighter than that. I mean, this is what we're supposed to do for a living, is be able to analyse games of footy and 2 teams that are going at it. So 57 years, destiny, all that stuff might be nice, but that group aren't thinking about that. They're just looking at the Western Bulldogs, watch what they did on Saturday night against Port Adelaide, and said destiny's going to count for anything. You've got to go out and earn it and win it, and that's going to be one of the great challenges, and it's why we are looking at this with such anticipation.
Brownie, tonight Ollie Wine said he thought Melbourne's best wasn't the best. He thought the Bulldogs' best was the best he's seen this year.
Well, he would think that after last week, after they wiped them off the paddock by quarter time. So, I think it's for me, they've been the two best teams in the comp for most of the year, which is always great when you get a grand final in that regard. So we know the Bulldogs wobbled late. That was on the back of that Josh Bruce injury. They just need to recalibrate. So, look, we've spoken about the preparation. I think it favours the Western Bulldogs simply because of the inactivity of Melbourne. But how much does that impact them? I'm not sure. It's a real unknown, but I guess it's how the players handle it the fortnight leading into the game, Jared.
Interesting, Clarko said, Nick, that he would tip Melbourne if it wasn't for the fact that they've played 1 game in 28 days, so he's concerned.
Yeah, so we're talking about the pure physical preparation, the match-hardened physical hardening that you get by actually coming up against the opposition. But when you talk about the profile of the two teams and why they were the best two teams for the majority of the year, I mean, have a look at some of the numbers here. The one issue for the Dogs at times was their ball movement, particularly in the latter half of the year, their ability to take it from one end of the ground to the other. We know there's a bit of recency bias, I think, with the Bulldogs as well, where we criticise them really harshly for that last month of the season. Non-competitive ruck work, but the mind games now are what become really interesting for the players, and you look to the stars, don't you? And we're going to have 6 of the best 15 players in the competition in the centre bounce at the first bounce of the grand final. It's an unbelievable star-studded lineup.
And I don't think we're going to be seeing too many hard tags if what Clarko and Damien Hardwick were talking about. Of course...
that's interesting, though, because early in the year, so they played each other twice this season. They're 1-1. So Harms did a magnificent job on Liberatore earlier in the season in that great victory by Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. But yet the second time around, Liberatore starts out of the centre square. They don't use Harms on him to tag, certainly not much early, and then Viney ends up playing on him. So there was a change of tactics, and the Bulldogs turned the tables on the game there. So it was a wettish night. I think it probably suited the Bulldogs' game style more that night. So what do you take out of those two occasions throughout the season? I'm not sure.
So, gentlemen, you are charged with coaching both of these clubs. Nick, you're with Simon Goodwin and the Demons. Brownie, you're with Luke Beveridge and the Dogs. Nick, you've got the first chance to tell us why the Demons are going to win and what should they be worried about.
Well, it's a camp I'm quite happy to be in, Jared, to be honest. And I think Simon Goodwin's, he's a fascinating... We look at Oliver, we look at Petrarca, we look at all the stars. I think Simon Goodwin has got a really interesting week ahead of him at the moment. I think what he's considering right now, and it's not a dilemma, but it's a decision, is how do I approach the game backing in our strengths, what we've done really well all year, against what the Bulldogs are really good at. And we heard from him a few weeks ago, let's just be us. If we can just be us, then we'll be fine. And that has been true so far. But he comes up against a pretty unique weapon in the Western Bulldogs this year. And when I look at Melbourne and the way they've been beaten this year, so my mind goes back to the Melbourne v Giants game at the MCG. I was there, I got to watch this game live, which does make a difference. And Melbourne were happy to be compromised at stoppage to have an extra number behind the ball. So the Giants sent a half forward up, they had an extra at stoppage, they were able to win it. And then really importantly, what they did was they were able to chain out from stoppage.
Which is what the Bulldogs do.
That's exactly right. So that's the Bulldogs' great strength, is their ability to win it at stoppage and then chain out with hands and be really damaging. So last week, Port Adelaide, what they said is, hey, you can have the extra at stoppage, we'll back ourselves to win it back. Well, guess what? They won it, they got their hands on it, the Bulldogs, and then they didn't blast it. Port Adelaide didn't touch it. They said, we'll back our system, we'll let the Bulldogs have their great strength and we'll back our system to beat the Dogs. They got blown off the park. Now, albeit Port didn't show up. Melbourne are going to show up. So I think that's the dilemma now for Simon Goodwin.
You're surprised they allowed that, Port Adelaide, last week?
Really surprised.
Clearly it's worked. The Bulldogs have been targeted by other teams.
Really surprised, because I think when you look at the Bulldogs, that's the one punch they can really throw at you.
So what will the Demons do?
Well, that's the decision now for Simon Goodwin to make. Do you back yourself in defensively where you've been so good all year? Not just the best this year, the best we've ever seen defensively at conceding a score when the ball goes in their defensive 50. So is he happy to allow the Dogs to have an extra number at stoppage, knowing how good they are chaining out, and back your pressure, which was red hot last week against the Cats? Or do you think, as Simon Goodwin says, you know what, we'll go up with Smith, we'll go up with Treloar, we'll go up with Hunter, we'll back our defenders 5v5 and trust that the rest of our game that we're looking at here is so good that if we can take away that Bulldogs' really good punch, we'll be able to control the game.
Yeah, that profile there gives you some sort of an idea, I reckon. I think they lean towards the just be us model and back themselves in. I mean, I think Bailey Smith offers them the biggest conundrum, whether you go run hard with, given the form that he's in and the roles that he'll play. Melbourne want to keep their wingers. They've been fantastic for them all year, so I don't think they want to change that too much. So whether Luke Beveridge tries to manipulate that. But that vision you just showed then, Rui, also gives you a bit of an idea about how bad Port Adelaide were. Darcy Byrne-Jones had first crack at that. Darcy Byrne-Jones was on his own, had first crack at... Well, I went back and watched that this afternoon, and I mean, we were critical of the fumbling. When they had first possession opportunity throughout the first half, the Port Adelaide Footy Club, and just made a meal of it. They didn't show up, and they didn't show up mentally, but they didn't show up from a skill point of view. They were second grabbing and gave the Bulldogs a crack at it.
Very impressive, Nick, your preview for the coaching position. In fact, Greg Williams has already texted. Wants you to be a Brownie, you've got a challenge.
Won't be happy if he hears that.
You've got a challenge.
I'm like Clarko. Diesel, not available.
Fossey might call him as assistant coach. Who knows?
So how do the Dogs win, and what are they worried about?
Yeah, it's interesting. So you look at Melbourne's strategy. They tick all the boxes, don't they? So I'm thinking, right, how do we take the strengths away from Melbourne? So I'm going to target individuals. So the three most impactful players, I think, for Melbourne, Max Gawn, Clayton Oliver and Jake Lever. So let's go for target number one, and we're going to take away one of their one-woods, or certainly try and impact his game. Max Gawn, he's the most critical player. Back in 2019, round one. Now, this could be looked at, you know, he was physically targeted. You know, it did change his focus on the occasion. Now, we know Maxie's been magnificent the last couple of years. So are they tossing up the Western Bulldogs? Hey, let's just change his focus a little bit. Obviously, Stephen Martin came back into the lineup last week. Let's just niggle him a little bit, try and switch him off, don't allow him to run forward as easily. So we saw the impact it had on that day. Port Adelaide had a huge win. So that'd be maybe getting discussed at the coaching committee. Stephen Martin is going to play a huge role. So if they could nullify Max on the day, it gives them a lot better chance of winning. So look at Stephen Martin's performance. He competed really well against Scott Lycett in that preliminary final. Yes, they lost first possessions, but have a look at the clearance differential and the scores from clearance. So a lot will fall onto the shoulders of that man, Stephen Martin, who was actually best mates with Maxie Gawn.
In fact, Max had a few things to say about his best mate not long ago.
I wouldn't call us best friends, but we were right up there as really close mates when we were at the club together. We were inseparable, Steph and I. And then Steph took off to Brisbane, and we stayed in close contact, and even now we're texting each other during this week. I sent him a text saying hi, that's all I wrote, and he goes, who would have thought this would happen? Yeah. And then I took him back to a China trip, the infamous China trip that we're probably not allowed to talk about, but I will. Steph and I slept in one day and missed a scavenger hunt around Shanghai, and I dobbed him in and said it was all his fault. So he wants to get one back on me. So he's the strongest player I've played on. Him and Brodie are right up there as strengths. Steph's probably just a tiny bit stronger, and so crafty and really dominates ball ups and boundary throw-ins. So I'll try and get him there. I understand he's played limited games and limited game time, and hopefully maybe I'll be fitter and running better. But Steph, notably, when we were playing together, was the better runner. Yeah. So I'm sure that'll come back into his game at some point as well.
The current Melbourne captain with a former Melbourne captain, and you'll see the extended interview on our magnificent coverage coming up on Saturday afternoon. Brownie?
I'd say, Steph, don't let Maxie lull you into being too matey before the game, OK? You've got to have a bit of mongrel about you. These are the change from the round 19 game at the MCG where the Bulldogs did have that victory. So significant change is Josh Bruce is out. You know, he did his knee. So, but Stephen Martin is in. Treloar, Dunkley, Eastonwood, they're big ins, aren't they? Yeah. Whether from that clash where the Dogs actually won that game by 20 points. So that was significant. Target number 2, Clayton Oliver. He's been magnificent all year. Voted in a lot of games. Big impact. He has a lot of score involvements now. Let's just have a look at Josh Dunkley. He's changed of role. He struggled there for a few weeks since come back into the side, Rui. He's actually Beveridge has given him a role. Started off in that final against Essendon where he did the job on Darcy Parish in the second half. Yeah. And so now you wonder whether it's probably not a hard tag, but you say to him at the stoppage, do you have some accountability, Rui?
Yeah, well, I mean, you would certainly think so, wouldn't you? I mean, we thought as much going into the Port Adelaide contest, the Geelong contest, and Selwood tried. I mean, Selwood tried to get with him. I thought what was really interesting was the way Petrarca worked himself into that as well. So you can have plans, but you've got to be ready for Melbourne to throw something back as well, because they'll be planning for it to happen.
Absolutely. Josh Schache, target number 3, or he's got a role. Jake Lever would be target number 3 now.
And if you're a Melbourne fan, I mean, don't be spooked by the Aliir-Schache matchup, because when you actually look at Aliir's game high intercept possessions, game high intercept marks. So he was able to intercept the footy like he'd been doing all year. The trouble with Aliir's game was when he actually won the footy. What he did with it. It was his disposal that let him down.
I think Shaqy plays on leave, but what he needs to do, he needs to stay in line with the football, like he did on Lear. So just show this little lab here. This helps Aaron Norton. So if Lever is not allowed to drop off, now he's playing on Shaqy at the top of the goal square there. So, Alir. So he is keeping him honest by playing central. He's not trying to lead too wide, so Alir can drop off. You can imagine he would be Jake Lever in this situation. And then Norton can launch in from the side. So that's when Norton plays his best footy, really, and he's at his most dangerous.
So when he's not the target, he's even more dangerous. So how do they win in summary, Brownie?
Well, I think it really summed up well. They'll try and get outnumbered at the stoppage, the Western Bulldogs. So we want to be able to create that if I'm Luke Beveridge. Caleb Daniels the man. He needs to be the architect around stoppages. He was the most important player on the ground in the round 19 win. He started half forward. Quickly, Beveridge identified there was an opportunity for him to exploit the back of the stoppages, and he became the quarterback, the creator. I thought Melbourne were either slow to identify Caleb Daniel there, or they didn't do anything about it and they just allowed him to roam free. So he had a significant impact. So I'm trying to create a situation where Caleb Daniel can be my quarterback. He can set up my drive out of the back of stoppages, and he can really loiter in around, off half-back, up through the centre of the ground, and then eventually you can float up and get involved in the scoring plays, as you'll see with this last play. But, I'd be surprised if they let him run free like this, Rui.
Well, I mean, you look at sort of recent history as well. So what Hawthorn were able to do to the Bulldogs late in the season, where they took away the extra at stoppage, they took away Daniel, they took away Bailey Dale off half-back as well. So if it's good enough for Alistair Clarkson, you'd think it's good enough for the D's to get it done as well.
Get in there, he says, young Caleb Daniel. But there's no bigger asset than the Bont, who should be ready to go. He was pretty good in the prelim finals. In fact, he was fantastic, and he's had another week off.
Yeah, absolutely. He'll be fresh to the days. He dominated that round 19 clash as well, especially in the forward 50 stoppages where he kicked a couple of goals. So I'm going to try and get him freed up there, get him inside 50 into those situations, and hopefully he can turn up. And on the biggest stage, which he did in 2016, have another great game.
To you good gentlemen who are going to give us your tips before you leave us. Firstly, to you, Gary, who's going to win and who's the Norm Smith?
Hart, Demons, Head, Demons, and Clayton Oliver, the Norm Smith.
Yep, Melbourne for me as well, Gaz, and Petrarca. He's going to hit the scoreboard. He's going to kick straight this week.
I think we'll win, and I think I'll win the Norm Smith.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, so you can get this here. I woke up this morning in the Herald Sun. Have a look at that, Jerry. Have you got one?
Indeed I have. I'm going with a smoky.
Or you can take it.
I'm going to go with a little bloke, Jack Viney, for the Norm Smith medal. I think the Demons will win as well. Don't forget the coverage starts with Countdown on Saturday at 2 o'clock.
Go, Gaz.